Apparently, there's a global shortage of chartreuse. I heard that and I panicked, went out, and luckily a local bottle shop had both yellow and green chartreuse in stock, and I got a backup of each. This is seriously several years' supply of chartreuse for me. I do not use it very often. But yes, chartreuse is getting increasingly hard to find around the world for arguably a unique reason. This is legitimately made by some monks, and chartreuse was very popular. I think some pressure was put on them to increase output, and they said, no, you know what? We're not really about the booze, and we don't care that we could make money from it. We're going to focus even more on our monk-like activities. So I think they're actually slowing production of chartreuse after being asked to increase. As a result, as words got around, it's one of those things that compounds. It is a little harder to get chartreuse. People hear it's harder to get chartreuse. They rush out and get chartreuse. Then it gets much harder to find chartreuse. This is probably happening for the foreseeable future. Not to boast, I don't have to worry, but obviously people who can't get chartreuse, and there are a few very popular chartreuse drinks, you need to start thinking, what can I do if I don't get chartreuse? So even though I have this chartreuse, I'm going to make a version of what I think is definitely the best known chartreuse cocktail, The Last Word, and I'm going to do a substitution just to see what I think of it. If you're not familiar with The Last Word, it's an equal parts cocktail in its most common form, and that would be gin, green chartreuse, maraschino liqueur, and lemon juice. There are a huge amount of riffs on The Last Word, and the names given to them are usually a play on The Last Word. Things like The Final Argument, or simply The Last Word done in a different language. If you're doing a riff and keeping the spirit of it, really it's like equal parts, and you want a spirit, a herbal element, a sweet liqueur, and a citrus. The one thing I'm going to change out is the green chartreuse. And there are, of course, a whole spectrum of herbal liqueurs and spirits on the market that you could use. They're not all as strong. I mean, green chartreuse is 55% alcohol by volume, which is pretty high for that sort of drink. But there's a lot of herbal liqueurs and spirits out there. You will get a different drink if you use one. That doesn't mean you get a bad drink. The two substitutes I was leaning most closely to were Dom Benedictine, because I like it, and a whiskey herbal liqueur like Drambuie, because that's quite widespread. And I thought, I'm going to go towards the whiskey side, and I want to put just a little bit of absinthe in there as backup as well to get some of those more intense herbal notes that the green chartreuse has. And I don't actually have Drambuie, but I have a couple of Australian versions, and I was doing some comparative taste tests, and then I went, wait a minute, I have my own. I made my own whiskey and rum herbal liqueur with my own secret recipe. A secret recipe that I gave detailed instructions for in a video. So I think I said to use lemon juice in a last word. It's lime juice by tradition. A professional would go back and check and maybe reshoot, but seeing as I'm not using chartreuse, I'm using my own herbal liqueur, I decided I'm going to use a whole bunch of Australian ingredients in this. The gin element, I'm going to use Archie Rose's Bone Dry Gin. The maraschino, I'm going to use this local maraschino they call Naked Maraschino. The reason they say naked is they don't have anything artificial in it. It's a very nice one. It's much darker. A lot of maraschino liqueurs, you get a clear. This one, they haven't stripped out the colour. It's the natural colour of all the natural ingredients that are in it. And along with that will be my homemade liqueur and some lime juice. To make this in our shaker, we're going to put 3/4 of an ounce, about 22.5 mils of gin, then 3/4 of an ounce of my homemade herbal liqueur. Follow that with 3/4 of an ounce of the maraschino liqueur, then 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice, and just to keep things interesting, putting about half a bar spoon, 2.5 mils of absinthe in there. Add ice to the shaker, shake that good and hard for around 10 seconds, and then strain it into a chilled glass. I fully admit this is not a very visually appealing drink. It's much darker and murkier because of the ingredients I used compared to a traditional last word. But what's it taste like? That actually tastes pretty good. You know, it's not that far off the mark to a last word. That little bit of absinthe, tiny bit of absinthe, It's not overpowering, but it's right there. This is quite a nice drink. I have to come up with my own name, some riff on last word. I think I'll call this a dry argument. That's an Australian saying, like if you're at the pub with some mates and you're waiting for someone to get the drinks in and they're a bit slow, you go, bit of a dry argument, mate. So if we can't get chartreuse, it's going to be a bit of a dry argument for chartreuse lovers. Maybe this sort of idea will see you through. I completely understand someone saying, no, chartreuse is unique. Green chartreuse very much is its own thing. There are a lot of herbal liqueurs, but look, go glass half full. I say treat the chartreuse shortage as a chance to explore. If you can't get chartreuse and you want to make a drink that would traditionally have chartreuse, get creative. Think, what things could you put in there? I quite like this. I'm sure you're a creative person too, and you can come up with something. In the meantime, unless you know where I live, I can't help you with any chartreuse. I'm going to stick with my dry argument. Cheers.